Okay.
Recording.
Okay, sounds good. Well, welcome everyone to our 14th annual Growing Online Learning Conference presented by Illinois Community Colleges Online. The theme for the 2022 conference is Quality Online Teaching, Learning, and Support. We hope that this year's conference is beneficial as the pandemic continues to challenge us with the need to adapt to new instructional and support strategies to ensure student success. I'm Lisa Dierda, and I will be moderating this session. ILCO would like to thank Heartland Community College for providing the web conferencing platform for use for this year's conference. Please note that captioning is available for the conference sessions. Our schedule is on the screen and can also be found at the conference website at ilco.net under Resources and Events. Links to attend the live sessions will be also found on the conference website and your registration confirmation email. If you have any questions on accessing the sessions, please contact Jeff Newell at jeff.newell@illinois.gov. Recordings of the presentations and handouts will also be available on the conference site on ilco.net following the conference. ILCO is pleased to welcome our faculty panelists for today's session. They are Mary Engel and Ann Humphrey from McHenry County College and Deborah Guerrero and John Hallowell from Moraine Valley Community College. We appreciate them taking the time to be with us here today and for our panel discussion and showcase. To kick off the panel discussion, we're going to ask each panelist to please introduce yourself and describe your online teaching experience. Mary, we'll go ahead and start with you.
Hi, everybody. My name is Mary Engel, and I've been teaching online since 2004. I've had extensive training, and I also have a PhD in instructional design for online learning.
Ann, if you'd want to introduce yourself, please. Oh, we can't hear you.
Sorry, I'm Ann Humphrey. I teach English. I've been teaching online since, I believe, 2007. And I have taken like all the ION classes and come to Growing Online Learning many times. Thank you, Lisa.
Thanks, Ann. Debbie?
Hi, I'm Debbie Guerrero. I teach sleep technology at Moraine Valley Community College. I do not have anywhere near as extensive online experience as the previous two speakers. I taught one course per year online for about the last 6 years prior to this. So I was thrown in probably a little bit more than some of the other panelists were.
And John?
Hi, everyone. I'm John Hallowell. I'm Department Chair of Developmental Education and Coordinator of our Intensive English Language Program at Moraine Valley. And I teach in the Intensive English Program, and I also teach college writing and linguistics when I'm free. I started teaching online, I think, as early as 1997 with computer-assisted language learning. At the time, it wasn't fully online, but I taught how to incorporate computers and language learning at the time. And I think the first online course for me was around 2003, and I taught graduate courses in pedagogy of teaching grammar in second languages. And I kind of fall in between, I think, everybody else. I haven't had a lot of training, but through trial and error and lots of mistakes and successes, that's where I got my experience.
Thanks, John. The first question that we have for you is, how has your experience with emergency remote teaching impacted or improved the quality of your teaching practices?
I'll start off. So first, before I talk about my teaching practices, I think teaching and learning practices throughout the entire college dramatically changed for the better as soon as the pandemic hit. A huge shout out to our moderator today, Lisa Dierda, and also Sarah Gallagher, who work in our Center for Teaching and Learning, for putting together a phenomenal array of resources for us totally on the fly. They developed great stopgap training for those who had minimal to no online or Canvas experience. They also, with help from the college, provided a lot of services for our students, including laptops and technology, Wi-Fi in the parking lots. John is my next door neighbor office-wise. What else did they do for us college-wide, John?
Yeah, you know, the Wi-Fi hotspots that students could check out of the library. iPads were available. For me, in my classes, I think online tutoring moved online, and suddenly we had more robust scheduling. We had a lot more support. We had online proctoring so that I could give quizzes and tests asynchronously, which was nice. And we had better video conferencing platforms, I think, that helped a lot. And the 24/7 tech support. We had really good tech support, I think, at Moraine Valley, but once everybody shifted remote, students were struggling with things all over, and the tech support was really good.
Yeah. Personally, my teaching experience, I found when we had to quickly put everything online that was previously face-to-face, I learned that what was mediocre in the classroom that I wasn't really paying attention to being only mediocre. I think I thought it was better than it was. But what was mediocre in the classroom was disastrous online with no adaptations. So it really made me reflect on what was I doing previously that I could have been doing better. The things that I was doing pretty well, the group projects, the assignments that were promoting active learning, those transitioned over to online really well. And I think the students benefited because they learned how to give presentations the way we are now versus standing up in front of a classroom. And that's something that as my students graduate in May, they might be exposed to really soon. So I think it kind of, me being thrown to the wolves and them being thrown to the wolves in some way has helped them in being able to use the technology. But I think overall, I have just reevaluated what I've been doing both online and in the classroom, particularly the things that did not go well when I quickly transitioned them over. So I would like to hope that moving forward, I'm going to inspect everything I've been doing a little bit more closely and make sure that I make everything I teach be a little bit more engaging, interactive, and student focused.
And Deb, I echo your feelings. I think that the 2020 stopgap training that most of us got, most faculty got anyways at Moraine Valley, was crucial. And then I went on to do some more with our Center for Teaching and Learning, an online course development training course. And it really helped me to look back and see what is it that I really do in my classes. What is it that how do I really want to engage students to get back to the pedagogy as a faculty member. And I've always been a very reflective teacher, but this really, as Deb said, what wasn't working in the classroom, I could sort of piece together and salvage face to face. But when it was online, especially if it was asynchronous, forget it. Right. And so it really forced me to look back at my teaching and what I wanted to do and look at the ways that I did that. And language learning requires a lot of meaningful interaction in lots of different ways. And it really forced me to create synchronous and asynchronous opportunities for students to interact with materials, with me, with other students, using a lot of the improved services that we had on campus. And I think what I saw in my online courses improved dramatically. But now as I'm back face to face, the interaction has extended asynchronously. And so I've got this sort of seamless connection outside of class, this natural extension of what we're doing in the class. And that's always been a goal of language learning. So, it's been really an interesting experience, but really helpful, both online and face-to-face.
Very well, thank you. Those are great responses, and I've learned a little bit already. So that's what these panels are all about. So thank you. Moving on to the next question we have here. What advice would you share with a new online faculty member to help them ensure that they have a quality online course?
So with my experience and my research, there are 3 primary forms of interaction in an online course. Students will have interaction with other students, students will have interaction with the course content, and students will have interaction with the teacher. And the student's interaction with the teacher seems to be the highest predictor of student satisfaction and success in a course. And so I would encourage you to be really visible to your students, and they see you in the design, especially if you're like doing video. Some teachers are really effective at communicating and being really present in a discussion board. For me, this is driven by the content. I don't do a lot of discussions in my classes. We do peer review, but I teach programming. And I don't want my students to talk about programming. I want my students to program. And so for me to show teaching presence, I have where I've recorded individual videos for each lesson. And when they send me a program that's not working, I put on a screen recorder and I walk through as if I'm sitting side by side with them to show them how to fix the program that's not working, how to debug it. And then I send them the video. And that's one of the things that for me, my students like. Programming lends itself to that. What you really need to figure out how to do is to connect to the students. And they're struggling right now, especially with the pandemic. The other thing I've learned is that what used to work with students saying, hey, I'm concerned about your grade, you were missing 5 assignments, something like that. With the pandemic, I've started with, are you okay? And I send emails in Canvas. At each week after I do my grading, I check and see where the percentages are as far as their grades. And anybody who's below a C gets an email of, are you okay? Here's our tutoring hours. How can we help? And the students really appreciate it. And I alternate between, are you okay? I'm concerned, but expressing that I care. That goes a really long way for students, because then they'll open up to me. Or if I just say, hey, you're missing 4 assignments, they don't tend to open up to me and tell me what's going on. If I say, hey, I'm really concerned, I'm seeing your grade dropping, let me know what's going on, how can I help? I get a much, much better response. And so it's really important to be supportive and to talk with students. And the other thing is, it's important not just to email the students who are struggling. I typically, on a 16-week term, I'll typically email all the students at 4, 12, and 16 weeks. If they're doing a great job, I just like, hey, you're getting an A in the class, you're doing amazing, great job. If you ever need anything, here I am. And I've had students who email me back and say, I almost never get positive feedback. This is so awesome, you made my whole day. So communicate. You cannot over-communicate with your students.
Thanks, Mary. I think that's really good advice. You know, I think we talk a lot about how we can humanize our classrooms and forge those connections with our students, and remember not to only focus on our students that are struggling, and to reach out to them personally and say, are you okay? You know, that's so powerful and so meaningful to them, especially with everything we've been through. But, you know, to make time to also reach out to the students that are doing well and get that kind of feedback has got to just be so rewarding. So thank you for sharing that. Hopefully that's good advice for some people that are maybe new to online teaching to continue that and be present in their classes. Next question here. While teaching online, what is something that you are most proud of? Anne?
I gave this question some thoughts. I'm proud of everyone for their response to the pandemic, and I was so excited. I was actually excited during the first couple of weeks by colleagues who had expressed zero interest in even computers before, you know, all of a sudden really rising to the occasion, and our college administrators staying on point like the whole time on morale for us and the students. For me, the chance came to test out some of what I thought was important, and some things to be like, oh, that's not so important after all in my online teaching, and other things to think, wow, that now I really see where that can make a difference. And I'm looking forward to getting rid of the masks because one of the things I learned is that my face is important and their faces are important. But I really valued that kind of like crucible test, you know. So I tried to put some of my answers to this in today's panel. One of the most important things that I can advocate for now is I put all my students in one shell in one space. So I have one big class of right at this point 93, and that just gives them a lot more interaction, which became even more important during the pandemic.
Thanks, Anne. Speaking of the panel, we're going to transition over to the panel now. I thank you all for your responses to those questions and the thought that you put into them. One of the things that we've asked each of our faculty panelists to do here today is to share some techniques with you that they are using in their online classrooms to engage and promote interaction among students. So they're each going to take a few minutes and share with you some techniques, and we'll go ahead and let them get started with them. Mary, you're up first.
Okay, go ahead to the next slide, please. So I actually went and got my PhD in instructional design for online learning for my beginning programming course. Across the country, programming is a course, the first programming course, roughly half of the people fail. And what I do in both my live and my online, because by creating an online course, I use the same material in my live course. If they're sick, if they're missing something, having the videos, having all the support I give to the online course is just an added benefit. And that way I have one course to maintain, and it's way better to have the extra stuff. What I've found is the biggest struggle for my programming students is it makes sense when I'm lecturing, when we're doing something together in the classroom, when they're watching the video, and then when they go to try it, they get stuck and they can't move forward. And so prompt feedback was critical. And I was just overwhelmed because I started by, as I was grading their work, I was creating custom videos for each student. And it became too much for me, and it wasn't giving students feedback fast enough because they'd have multiple programs due on the same day. So if they got the first one wrong, they weren't able to go on to the next ones. So what I did was they have exercises that they complete as they read the chapter. And that's based on sample programs from the chapter. They have something similar to do in their exercises. And I did this, I used to do multiple choice quizzes, but for my area, I don't care about vocabulary, things like that. It's can you apply the concepts? And I interviewed every programmer that I know and asked them, when you're learning a new language, how do you learn it? And every single one of them said, well, I look at an example and I try to do something similar but not identical to see if I really understand it. So I have my students doing that. And that's due typically on Wednesday, where they go through the chapter and they've read it so they can get questions. And once they've done it, it unlocks a video of the solutions. So they're supposed to, now they're not all doing it, but as soon as they're done, they're supposed to watch the video, which is usually about 3 minutes to 5 minutes, depending on the chapter, and they're supposed to compare their results so they can fix and then resubmit that chapter exercise program. So it's sort of low stakes because it's complete, incomplete. I don't care if they get it right on the first try or not. I want them to try it. And the learning research says if you try it, even if you get it wrong, trying it, seeing the answer and going back, that is a really solid way to help them understand. And then we have 2 more practice programs. So the other programs are due on Monday, so they have the weekend to work on them. And so I have 2 more practice programs where they complete the program, it unlocks a video. And then the last one I do is an assessment one. And this one I do grade personally. I mean, I normally am reading them on the others because I know what the working programs are supposed to look like. And if I'm uncertain if something will work, I'll run it. But usually I can just read the code and say, hey, this is wrong. When and I'm trying to get on their case. You're supposed to watch the solution video. Why are you handing this in with errors? And that's something I'm still struggling with. About 80% of my students watch the videos. About 20% don't want to be bothered. And so it's like, hey, you've got to watch the solution video so you can fix it and get on to the next step. But when I get to the assessment part, then I can get some individual feedback on each one. And that's telling me, did they get it? Where are they stuck? And then if they've got it, great. Usually out of 20 students, I'll send 4 or 5 individual videos on the assessment program so that I can go and they're allowed to fix and resubmit after that. But I want to see what they don't understand so that I can give them directed feedback. Can I get the next slide, please? I'm working in Canvas, and the way my class is set up, you can choose the 3 dots up in the corner. I've got it, you can see it says complete all items. So I have them where they have to complete all the requirements, and they move through the requirements in sequential order. So they have to submit the assignment, then they view an item. And they submit the assignment, and then they view an item. And so they're submitting and viewing the item. That's a page with a video embedded. Could I have the next slide, please? And this is just showing you what it looks like. We have Panopto. I used to use YouTube, and I used Camtasia. I still use Camtasia and then export it to Panopto because I like the video editing. I even have my own YouTube channel. If you're ever really bored, it's MCC Mary, M-E-R-I. This one's from YouTube. It's one of my older videos. And the students, what's cool to me is this is what they get when they, for the project or for the practice programs. But what I think is really cool is if I give them a custom video, I can see in either YouTube or Panopto how many times they've watched it. And I'm finding that they watch it an average of 4 times, which is neat because they watch it all the way through once, and then they go step by step and fix things. And I find that if their program isn't working and it's broken, they pay a lot more attention. They're ready for the help at that point. When it doesn't work, they want the help. Next slide. And the other nice thing I do with Canvas, I'm doing the low stakes ones with the videos, so they can hand it in, and it's set up where they can try as many times as they want. It's low stakes, and if there's something wrong, Canvas now has the option where you can give them feedback and you can reassign the assignment. And that's what I do for the assessment one at the end of each week. But encouraging the students, it's important to me that they come away with the knowledge. If they get on the first try, great. But the person who took 3 tries at a program to get to the solution worked way harder than the person who got on the first try. They get the same grade. As long as you get to the same destination, in my class, you get 100%. If it takes you 3 tries to get there, but you don't quit, you get 100%. Thank you. I think that's my last slide.
Okay. Thanks, Mary, for sharing all of that. I think it's so important that you've touched upon how you interact with them and how they're engaging with the content in a repeated fashion and being able to get that iterative feedback along the way, especially when we're doing so often online as asynchronous, so that they don't have to wait and then fail at 2 items, right? They're able to get that feedback right away. So I think that's some really good strategies to go ahead and use. I'm going to go ahead and move along for Anne's presentation.
Thank you. That's great. So I just put together a few things that I've recently been advocating that people try. Just suggestions. Next slide. One thing that I did that I had to figure out immediately was how to do examples that would include the HyFlex class. So I do a lot of, okay, I need 3 people to read me their sentence. I'm teaching Comp 1 and Comp 2. Oh, we're writing attention getters today. Well, I need 3 people, right? But I volunteered to do the HyFlex class where half, they can come in Zoom or in class. And so right away I started using Padlet. And that meant that the students in the HyFlex class could post, and just like the ones in the class, right? And immediately I had other benefits, like those examples just stayed there. And any students who missed class, I could be like, well, go look at the Padlet. And I just embedded the Padlet from a link in Canvas. I think the next slide has a picture. Also, and I just took this, like I saved the first semester's worth because I was so impressed with how it worked. And where the all caps are, I put, like, here's where this next assignment starts, right? So they could go to whatever they had missed, And I right away gave some other bribes too. Like, if you post in here and you put your name, then I can give you some extra credit, and if you're one of my volunteers, I can give you some immediate feedback. But this worked better because I have all the students in one class. So even though I only got 3 or 4 from each class, there ended up being like 9 or 10 in there for each, each assignment. So that's one thing. And then another thing I did, next slide. I just mentioned I cross-listed my sections. So I had started doing that just before the pandemic started. And as Mary said, it's so much easier when you just have one class to update. And people said to me, well, but if all your online materials are in the class for your face-to-face students, they won't come to class. But I've never had that problem. They still come to class. They signed up for a face-to-face class for a reason. Or right now they signed up to a HyFlex class for a reason. But those increased examples and activity, I think, do help the online students to stay on track. And then I very quickly started telling the face-to-face students they were helping me with the online students. I'm like, I need some of you to post. I need some of you to post in Padlet. I need some of you to post on the discussion board so the online students have some examples to look at, because they're not here at class. You have to help. They loved it. And to give them some ownership. So I have a slide next that just shows a picture of this in case you're not familiar. Well, so I end up with just one course, right? So right now I have 4 sections of Comp 2 and they're all in that one spot, Comp 2. And of course, when I open it, all the grading queue is all together too. It's a little intimidating, right? To have like 77 things get turned in one day. But I also do Phi Theta Kappa. So all I have on my main screen is whatever my course is in Phi Theta Kappa. I will say this works better if you just teach multiple sections of the same class, but we have one faculty member who teaches photography and he simply puts all the students together because if they're in photography 4, they still need all those lessons and materials and resources and everything from photography 1. So he has them all in there. And I just think that's brilliant. I got the idea from him, but it's easier for me because I have all sections and I intentionally schedule all Comp 1 fall semester, all Comp 2 spring semester. So anyway, I've been strongly advocating this to whatever extent a faculty member can do it. I do think it's helpful for the students. Just more activity equals, like they think, oh, something's going on in here. I better get moving, I think, yeah. And then the next thing on the next slide that I wrote down is lots of personality. So Mary kind of alluded to this with her video. I agree, right? The more you can get in there about you, the better. I do think it shows through in your grading, in your comments, in your videos. I even tried to just make audio feedback, even with no video. Mary needs the video because she's showing them their program, but I can just make audio and talk about their sentence. And even just the voice is good, right? They catch your enthusiasm and all of this. I encourage the students to change their profile picture. I put a few slides here to show I put an instructor information page. And then, which is kind of obvious, right? But then down at the bottom of that, I put pictures, which I think are on the next slide. And I purposefully put kind of funny ones. And before the pandemic, I did not direct students to this, but some would find it. And they would ask me, are you going to wear that costume? I'd be like, well, if I have time, sometimes they'd ask me about the gnome in front of the sailboat because I collect gnomes. And I was looking to see if they would just notice the boat or the gnome. But after the pandemic, I started actually mentioning this page because I thought it was so important to show more personality. I think I may have one more slide of this. Oh, here's where I assigned them to upload their profile picture. And I made a point that they can put any picture. It doesn't have to be a face picture because I have been told in an online class not to use just my feet there. And I think that's ridiculous. I'm like, put your feet. As long as you show personality, I'm happy with you. So I have this right in their first assignment, like this picture with my feet. And I think the more you can do to just be human and fun and enthusiastic about the course, the better it is. And then Lisa, I think I have one more. Our colleague, Holly Ray, who's our Center for Teaching and Learning Director, asked me to include my Gotcha board, which I have used for like 15 years. But it is true that I got much more feedback in Gotcha once the pandemic started. And it's just about, if you find an error on my Canvas page, post here, and then at the end I give some extra credit. And I used to get maybe 1 or 2 posts a semester. I mean, really, I didn't get much. But I did some, every time I would do revisions, I would get more. So I did some revisions at the beginning of the pandemic, which is another thing I'm proud of, because I did this huge project like during the pandemic. But the Gotcha board, I therefore got more because, right, I had changed those pages. And the students do kind of like this. And I tell them, I'm not upset if you tell me edits, because editing is part of our content in comp. And plus, I'm improving my pages. So I think I put a picture here too, Lisa. This is just the assignment, right? So I just say anything that I wrote in the course, especially the Canvas pages, but also like handouts or PowerPoints, whatever there is that you see. And then they make comments, and it's really good. And I think it pre-trains them also to like have a good attitude about getting feedback, and which I have to talk about quite a bit. So I think that's my last slide, Lisa, unless I have a question slide. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Anne. I think one of the most important things that you hit on there is like, we're not perfect, right? We can make mistakes, and then our students, I think, feel like they can be a little vulnerable if they make a mistake and know that they can correct it, right? And be able to move forward. So that and the Padlet, the idea, I know a lot of schools are engaging in high flex models, and to be able to kind of bridge that gap between students in different physical spaces, different times, I think is a really great strategy to be able to use in an online class and kind of create that learning community with all of your students to harness all that knowledge. So thank you very much for your sharing. Deb, you're up next.
Hello, next slide, Miss Lisa. So I'm pretty lucky in that I teach in health sciences, and our students all actually want to be in the classroom. They actually apply and sign up for this. So I don't teach a dreaded gen ed that is like, oh, I just have to take this. I put this picture of this little group here. They graduated in 2019, so they were 100% pre-pandemic. And this picture was taken right after the project that they worked on was completed. So healthcare students understand the nature of healthcare. It's very interpersonal. Communication and relationships are at the core of taking care of people. So we're very much hands-on in the classroom, which is why my long-term experience with online has been fairly limited. I took the class that I thought was the most theory and the least hands-on technical psychomotor possible and put it online years ago, but everything else was all face-to-face. So this group in particular loved to have parties. They planned pizza parties, going out. They go through the program in a cohort. So by the second semester, they're absolute best buds. They form their Facebook group. They're all, they come to class early. They bring dinner. They share dinner. They interact so well. They're a great team with picking out who's going to buy what for someone's party, who's going to bring the wrapping paper, who's going to do this. And I see it happen on a routine basis. And then I tell them, we're going to do a group project. And they say, oh, we hate working in groups. We don't want to be in a team. Every time I'm in a group, no one else does the work. I have to do all the work. And I say, you guys have been a team for a long time. You have study groups. You do fun things. You help each other out all the time. You tutor each other. You're a team naturally. No, can't you just lecture on that? Then we don't have to do the project. Hear that every year. And I'm sure, I can't see you all, but I bet there's some nods about, yeah, I assigned some group thing and all I get is, all this talk back about how dumb it is and we don't want to do it. But it's so important. This group as they were second year students, were randomly assigned into teams, and that's the way I do it. This year it was groups of 4, kicking and screaming, and the project was to, let's hit the next slide, Ms. Lisa. I'm jumping ahead of myself. Was to pretend that they were a consulting firm going out into a brand new sleep lab that had never been accredited before. And they were going to teach this sleep lab all of the accreditation standards and what the lab would have to do to meet them. So what the students would have to do, and I didn't teach them any of this. I wasn't going to go through all the standards. I gave them the standard book and said, you go through the standards and provide your consulting presentation to the lab, which was the rest of the class. And then part 2 would be to actually go out as a site visitor to a sleep lab and measure the lab's adherence to the standards as if they were actual site visitors. So we had done this a couple times face-to-face. It wound up working out really well, even though students didn't want to do it. So this was one of the projects that wound up being very easy to move online. It was never easy to get a student to want to do it or to like it, but instead of using classroom time to work together and independent time, they just all worked together online on their own. And when we would get together for virtual class, I would help them with issues and problems, and they would, ask questions about clarification of roles. And I purposely left it really loose so that the students could be creative and kind of run with it on their own. It being online, however, we were, March of 2020, we were kicked out of sleep labs, so the students couldn't go to a clinical site. Not only weren't we showing up on class in the classroom, we couldn't show up to the clinical site either, and that was the second half of the project. So I asked the students to figure out a way to do a virtual site visit. So just as we were learning how to do things virtually, they had to come up with, how could you connect with the sleep lab without physically being there and do part of the site visit? And they did a phenomenal job of figuring that out on their own, which was better than what actually happened when it was face-to-face. Next slide. So what came out of it? I mean, this comes out of the project even when it's not online, but I think it was even better when it was forced to move online. Absolutely increased inclusivity. So, when you have a cohort, there's always going to be a little group here that's good buds and a little group there that's good buds. And so when people are randomly selected to a group, they might be working with someone, just like in real life, that wouldn't be their first choice of who to work with. So they learn some teamwork skills, and we even talk about that, roles on a team and making sure that people get to play to their best strengths and that kind of thing. So increased inclusivity for sure. They understood better the value of working in a team because the group project produced much better results than any individual could have put together. There was a lot of synergy there in the way they worked together and came up with things. Definitely this is a critical thinking exercise in a huge way. They're pretty much in charge of this whole project. The communication skills, I think, were enhanced. They had to present not in a typical way, but they had to present online like we are now. And I think they learned so much more than they could have possibly learned any other way of presenting this. So my little portion here with you all today is more about getting outside of the traditional mode and putting the students behind the driver's seat, whether that's face-to-face or in an online environment. And so I think, again, kind of going back to the reflective practice that John and I talked about earlier, whenever we do things like this and see the results, it kind of forces me to say, some of that other stuff that I used to teach in a more traditional method can be converted over into more of a independent, active learning mode. Next slide was my last slide. So that's it. Take it away, John.
All right. Thanks, Deb. I appreciate your sharing, and I love that you made your students figure it out. I think as we've heard from so many teachers, especially over the past couple of years, we had so much to figure it out. It was kind of nice that they had to practice that too. Like, hey, you know what? We'll have to do a site visit. Like in practice, that's a really good skill for them. And to not have you say, this is exactly what you need to do to make it happen, or for you to do that legwork and have them do that is probably something that they're not going to forget as they finish up their programs here. So thanks for sharing. John, go ahead, take it away.
Yeah, thank you. And like Mary Ann and Deb, you know, I think all of this feedback and this interaction is crucial. If you go to the next slide. So I teach in the intensive English language program, and for us, I'll call it the IEL. The IEL is housed in developmental education, and the IEL, the language non-native speaker language learners, share some challenges with developmental education students. They often don't have the academic skills needed for success. They lack other cultural capital that's needed for success, like resource seeking, self-feedback, evaluating progress toward a goal or toward a project, sort of what Deb was describing, that you know, that openness can be really frightening for them, because sometimes they can't even figure out, I ran out of printer ink, I guess I can't turn in my assignment, right? And they're not working through the steps. And so developmental education students and language students many times need a lot more structure. They need clear, consistent communication and expectations, and they need a lot of personalized feedback and individual attention. And so, you know, engagement in the classroom is crucial, but especially in language learning, interaction is tantamount. And so it's really challenging in a face-to-face environment, but the challenges are magnified online. So next, please. In language learning, we talk a lot about sort of language acquisition, so input, output, and interaction. So input obviously is getting students to process material meaningfully. Output, they're practicing in a variety of contexts, from very, very controlled to more open, and we've seen a range of that with Mary Ann and Deb. And then interaction, they need to engage in different types of meaningful ways. And when they do that, they negotiate meaning. And that's one of the key words in language learning. Negotiating meaning, they reach an understanding. They clarify, they rephrase, they confirm what they think, and they end up getting to a place that's deeper than they would have had they done it by themselves. And so that's really the benefit in language learning. It creates a better understanding and a better language and better output. And throughout the whole process, you know, they're noticing things. They're noticing, and Mary mentioned this, they're able to see where they're making their steps. They're noticing gaps. They're being pushed to fix those and to fill those gaps, and then to move forward. And to do that, I need to set up these opportunities to interact with me, with each other, and in larger groups. And so the example I'm going to show you, you can see, is from an intermediate grammar class. I know, really exciting, but I love the grammar gal here. So next slide, please. So I know it's a little bit small, but I just wanted to give you a little context, just a little visual. On the left side is how I organize the course in general. In each module, I'm going to have an overview, and then learning materials, and then activities. And the activities are always marked with a star. Anytime they see a star, they know they need to turn something in. This was a product of our stopgap training, especially with Lisa. So I got lots of really cool tips from her and from that. So on the left is kind of the structure. And in this example, you know, I provide a video, and the videos are really, they're not even lecture videos. They're really short videos, but it's like I'm working with them one-on-one. And I do use videos on Panopto, and I like Panopto because they're forced to stop and maybe answer questions. I can put in little quiz questions, or as I'm working through the video with them, I ask them to do things with me and then to check like we're sitting together, and then sometimes I even have them submit them to me. So it's a very controlled practice, but it's not just input, there's also some output. They're actually doing something with it. Next, please. And so a little more controlled, less controlled, but still controlled practice is this online activity. Most of the activities I'm showing here they use collaborative tools or discussions or peer review. And I like that because students are guided to engage with each other in certain ways. So one of the things I do in my grammar classes is I give them sentences and they need to draw structure trees, syntactic trees. So it's a linguistic perspective. And what they'll do is I'll put them into groups of, say, 3, and they'll each take a certain number of sentences, and then they'll draw trees for them, and then they'll upload them to Canvas. And I'll turn it into a peer review activity, and I'll guide them to go in and annotate the trees from their peers. And you know, they're reticent about making comments about their peers. So, you know, I'll push them to say, okay, circle the subject, circle the verb phrase, find the object of the preposition, whatever. So they'll start to discover and notice things just by working with each other. Okay, so next slide. So a little less controlled is when they need to go to a website. And so in this one, at the movies, they need to go to imdb.com, pick out a movie, so there's the choice, and get a select set of information, and then they need to share that in a discussion. And as they share that in a discussion, they're going to comment on the grammar structures that we're using in class, but they're also focused on the meaning. And they can respond in writing, they can respond in video. Canvas is nice, it's really simple to push the web share. They can respond in audio. And so this is more of a guided interaction, but again, it gives them a little bit more choice and more opportunities for error and success. So next. And then the last example is a little bit more open practice where I'll have them watch a clip, 3-4 minutes, and this is one of my favorite clips from Up. And there's no dialogue in this, but it's really emotional. So I asked them to choose a scene and then describe it in some way. And then again, using a collaborative tool. One version is they'll co-write a paragraph describing a scene. Sometimes they'll put a discussion post up where they'll describe some details of a scene, or it could be a peer review annotation. But through it all, using the peer review collaborative tool, Google Docs, whatever it is, they're interacting a lot. And the nice thing about this is I get to use all of this stuff in my face-to-face classes as well. And so we can extend whatever we're doing in class to get them working asynchronously. So it works both in a face-to-face and an online environment. So that's it for me.
Thanks, John. It's nice to see as you're talking the head nods I'm seeing from the other panelists that can really relate, especially when you said how this is, you know, the benefits you've also seen in your face-to-face classes by doing this. I think across the board we've seen, you know, just such an increased comfort level with technology from our faculty, which, you know, certainly benefits our students and our students having better access to be able to practice all these things in different ways. And it's moved beyond just, you know, communication in a class meeting for a group project, and you have so many more tools and things that you've been able to leverage. So thank you for sharing.
Thank you.
We are at 2:48. We're going to be wrapping up here in just a moment. If anybody has any lingering questions or burning questions you'd like to ask our panelists, you can go ahead and drop them in the chat. While you're thinking about those things, I'm going to progress just through our last few slides here to wrap up some of the kind of conference notes. But certainly I'd like to thank our panelists today, Mary Ann, Deborah, and John, for their sharing of all of their experience and advice that they've shared with us today. A mega virtual round of applause to each of you. Thank you for all you're doing for the conference today and your sharing and for our students. On the screen here, we have the upcoming conference schedule for the next couple of days. So our next session is tomorrow, February 10th at 10 a.m. with Heather Moore from Rock Valley College, talking about creating a course template with quality in mind. We hope that you can join us for that session tomorrow. And then as a reminder, the recording of these presentations and resources will be available at our conference website at ilco.net. And if you have any questions or need additional information, you can reach out to Jeff Newell with those questions. Okay. I'm checking the chat just to see if we had any questions come through. And if anyone has a question and would like to unmute, that's certainly okay too. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. If you have questions, you can feel free to pass those along, and we'll be able to get that information for you. Thank you all for attending the conference presentations. We hope you all have a good day. Bye-bye.